Hey guys, it's John Paul here, and if you're thinking about buying, renting, or moving house over the next 10 years, wait. Let me run you through a few different options because you are in a unique time of your life right now to think, how do I really want to spend my time and money on putting a roof over my head?
Hey boy, you a man-child.
So here in Australia, we've fallen into a trap thinking that there's only really two options that we have in terms of housing. We can either buy a house or rent a house or apartment. And we really need to think outside of the box because right now here in Sydney, the price of housing is about $850,000 on average, which means that people are engaging in 30-year mortgages that cost them about 50% of their income or more. They're working 20 to 30 hours of their week just to service their loans. This leaves very little left for their relationships, for travel, for adventures, for doing the things that they're really passionate about. So I want to run you through 10 different options to find housing in Sydney or to travel around the world. It's really up to you, 10 years of your life. So here's 10 different options, starting with the most affordable, considering things like cost per week, the percentage of your waking hours that you'll need to service the cost of that, assuming that you're getting paid around $25 an hour. Considering that this is over the next 10 years, so it's not forever. And finally, considering the pros and cons of each different way of living. Starting with number one, van life. All right, so this is totally crazy. Not that many people do it, but some people do, and they live fantastic lives. They travel around the world in their own mobile home. And what becomes their home is really their village or the countryside or the beach or the city that they visit. So home becomes the entire world pretty much. Now, what does this cost? Well, most people start off on a budget of $20,000. That means that they can buy a van for about $10,000. And after that, they only really have to pay for parking, which usually people pay in a combination of free or paid parking. So let's factor on paying parking for 3 days a week. So that costs around $79 per week to service your initial loan and also for parking. That's 3 to 4 hours per week only, or 4% of your waking hours, assuming that you actually sleep 8 hours a day. That's really affordable, and the return on investment is about $5,000 at the end of 10 years if you choose to sell your vehicle. What are the pros? Adventure and freedom. It's a lovely way to get around the world or around your country, and so many people are doing it nowadays, it's unbelievable. The cons, cold winters. Van maintenance, less privacy, having to use public transport, and potentially challenges if you're looking to raise a family in a stable environment. There are some people who raise their families and travel around for years with kids, but it's not really for the faint-hearted. Option number two, tiny houses. Okay, so this is my choice on how I'd like to go about things. So I'm a little bit biased maybe, but what we're talking about tiny houses is tiny houses on wheels or ones that are not founded on foundations. The great thing about tiny houses is that they're transportable to different places, so you can rent out land or you can own your own. It's really up to you. This is definitely the cheapest way to own your own home and design the home exactly the way you want it. All right, the costs. I factor on an average of about $60,000 to get your own professionally built tiny home. You can do it for less or you can do it for more, it's up to you. And let's say you get that on a combination of loans and savings. That'll cost you, assuming that you also pay for a little bit of rent for the land that you park your tiny home on, $94 per week to service the rent and the loan. That's 4 to 5 hours per week or 5% of your waking hours. What are the pros? Firstly, affordable housing. Housing affordability is a huge issue, as we'll get onto a little bit later on. Tiny homes are really a great solution to not only cutting down your cost of living, but cutting down the amount of time that you spend on your living expenses. Minimalism. So living in a tiny home forces you to live minimally, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. It's really up to you. Location flexibility. The ability to move your house according to where you want to live and where you have to live, which might be due to work or it might be due to choice. What are the cons? Well, you have less space for stuff. So if you're a hoarder or collector, maybe this isn't the best way to go for you. Also, it's a relatively new concept, so rental availability is rather limited here in Australia at this point in time, and things like getting bank loans might be really difficult to get. Finally, the law. So right now, tiny house on wheels or that's not sited permanently, if you don't apply for planning permission, you can only really live in it legally for about 90 days. every year. Now that's obviously if someone complains, so you can get away with it maybe. That's what I'm doing personally, don't tell anyone. There is a risk that you might not be able to live as permanently as most people do in normal founded permanent homes. Third thing, backpacking. All right, so back to adventuring. Now this isn't for the faint-hearted or for everyone, but hey, if you're young or maybe even if you're old, go traveling. It's a lovely thing to do. You'll have experiences that you won't be able to get in normal sedentary life. And hey, we're just talking about 10 years, so go for it. One thing to bear in mind with backpacking is that you can choose to backpack literally and go from hostel to hostel if you want, or you can choose to rent out an apartment in somewhere inexpensive in the world like Buenos Aires or Berlin for less than you would be paying in Sydney for sure. The global average for accommodation is $25 per night, $175 per week. So that equates to, at $25 an hour, 8 to 9 working hours per week to service, or 8% of your waking hours. The pros, you get adventure and freedom. You get memories and experiences that you will not forget, and you have no weight, as in the possessions that you own are those that you carry in your backpack or suitcase or whatever it is. The cons, well, there's no return on investment. Really, what you pay in accommodation is a one-way street. Also, minimal privacy potentially, especially if you're staying in places like hostels to stay on the cheap. And finally, you could have pretty limited income on the road unless you're lucky enough to have set up some kind of passive income or local business from where you're actually from to service or pay for the costs of you traveling around. If you choose to live and work, then you could end up earning much, much less than most other people. Number 4, share housing. All right, so most people think about share housing as something that you do only when you're young, but you can do it when you're much older, and I know a lot of people who are doing this really, really successfully later on in their life. The cost of renting an apartment or a house in Sydney per room is about $250 per week on average, and that will equate to about 11 to 12 hours of work per week, or 11% of your waking hours. What are the cons? Good housemates. If you have good housemates, you have a good time. Simple as that. Also, access to affordable housing in desirable places. So sharing a house might mean that you're able to afford to live in a really, really nice part of Sydney in a way that most people who are renting or buying their own house or apartment can't achieve. What are the cons? Bad housemates. Also, there's no return on investment when you're renting. So, unlike buying a tiny house or any other home purchasing options, you really don't get back your money. You only pay the money for when you're renting, and it pretty much just disappears at that point. Number 5, caravan or RVing. All right, so back to traveling. This is one of those out there ideas. Maybe not for everyone, but hey, a lot of people do it and they have a great time doing it, and they have the freedom to be able to travel around the country or around the world in their own RV or caravan. What are the costs? $80,000 would buy you a decent caravan or RV nowadays, all right? So it's quite a lot, not a small amount. And factor in also that you're likely to pay something in regards to sighting. So I'm factoring on $75 per week on sighting, assuming that you're free camping some of that time per week. The cost per week is $426 on average. And that's about 19 to 20 hours of your work per week, or 18% of your waking hours. So we're getting up there, But the great thing about a caravan is that it is an asset. So you can resell it after your 10 years or whatever it is you want to use it for. And caravans usually attract about a $40,000 return on investment at this point in time. By the way, that's the same that goes for tiny houses as well. You're looking at getting about 50% back of the initial amount that you paid. Number 6. Social housing. All right, so this definitely isn't an option for everyone. Social housing is reserved for people who are on low incomes or have some kind of social disadvantage. But if you haven't looked at it, then maybe look into it. It might suit your situation. At this point in time in Sydney, the average rental for a 1-bedroom apartment or a studio or a bedsit is $495 per week, and that's for your own place. That equates to around 22 to 23 of your working hours per week, or 21% of your waking hours, potentially offset by government benefits, of course. All right, what are the pros? Well, you pay lower than the average rental in Sydney. And you get social support services usually surrounding you. Also, having your own apartment means pretty much the ultimate in privacy. You get your own space all to yourself, no housemates, no anything like that. What are the cons? Well, it's not for everyone. Absolutely not for everyone. Living in social housing means that you're likely to live in a place where, aesthetically speaking, it's less nice looking. Maybe just my opinion, but I've worked in social housing for over 10 years, and I personally believe that the quality of social housing in Australia is not really up to standard. It pretty much equates to cheap apartment living in Sydney or around the country, which usually means not very high quality. So bear that in mind. All right, number 7, renting an apartment in Sydney. Right, so let's get straight to the point. We all know what this is all about. Let's be honest, there are huge variances in costs in renting places in Sydney. So this is my attempt at going right at the average. All right, the average rental costs in Sydney is $700 per week. That equates to about 32 working hours or 29% of your waking hours. Now, 32 hours per week of work. Assuming that you work a full-time role of 40 hours per week, that's a huge chunk of your money going towards housing. So this is where I'd like people to really think about what they're doing here. Renting in Sydney is freaking expensive. All right, what are the pros though? Desirability. If you can afford to live in a great place, maybe pay more than $700 per week, then you could live in a fantastic part of Sydney. And by living in a normal rental property, you have the option of earning more than a lot of the other options that we've discussed earlier in this video. So potentially you can reduce the amount of time that you spend paying for your rent by earning a higher income than $25 an hour. But that might not be possible for everyone. All right, what are the cons? Short-term leases. Now, I've heard about a lot of people getting kicked out of their house because the rent prices have gone up and they can't afford to pay the rent anymore. So at the end of a 6-month or 1-year lease, they're out of there. They have to find somewhere else. So that's not really stability in my point of view. Also, increasing rent prices. Rent prices are going up all the time and landowners want you to pay. So if you can't, then you're out of luck. High cost of living. Again, going back to having to work around 32 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less, to just rent your own apartment. To me, that is absolutely ridiculous money, and it is one that you won't get any return on investment for. Moving right along, number 8, building your own permanent, professionally built eco house. All right, so this idea is a little bit out there. Not too many people think about it, but it is an option. Eco housing is becoming more and more popular over time, and there is a growing industry here in Australia to build things like tree houses and earthships and container homes, prefabricated homes, etc., etc. Either way, this is a more affordable way to build your own house. What are the costs? $600,000 would probably be a good starting point to build your own house and site it on your own land that you own. So you're going to have to get a 30-year mortgage here, and at this point in time, that's at 4.55%. So you'll end up paying about $714 per week to service that. That's 33 working hours per week or 29 waking hours. Now, the great thing about owning your own home is that you get huge return on investment potential at the end of 10 years or whenever it is you choose to sell it. And my calculation is that you'll get $1.3 million back after 10 years if you pay $600,000 for a house at this point in time. All right, what are the pros? Eco luxury. You could be living in a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful architect-designed home for yourself. Eco housing means lower running costs over the lifetime of that house, meaning lower energy bills, lower gas bills, etc., etc. What are the cons? Well, building and financing eco homes is not as easy as normal homes at this point in time. We're talking about issues of planning permission and getting home loans. There are also a few eco inconveniences. For example, you might need to reduce the amount of energy that you consume in terms of electrical power. So if you're a tech geek or somebody who likes their gadgets and big TVs, etc., then you might be out of luck. Also, this is the first option we're talking about that gives you a massive mortgage, all right? Now, let's not take this lightly. A big 30-year mortgage that you have to spend $714 on per week to service. That's a lot of money. And just like apartment rental, you could be spending a huge chunk of your waking hours towards servicing the loan. And this really raises the question, is buying a home or even renting an option only for the rich now in Sydney? Number 9, buying an apartment. All right, so we're back to normal now. This and the next option are your usual ways of securing your own home through buying. The cost. $700,000 would get you an average apartment here in Sydney, plus strata fees, of course. So at a 30-year mortgage at 4.55%, that will set you back about $800 per week, or 36 work hours, or 32 waking hours per week. Let's be honest, that's a shitload of time and money. The great thing is that your ROI will be about $1.4 million at the end of 10 years. All right, what are the pros? You get your own place. What are the cons? You lose your life. In all honesty, buying an apartment in Sydney is really expensive. You'll get into long-term debt and you'll get strata fees. All right, finally, building or buying your own house. At a cost of $850,000 on average in Sydney, that will set you back $1,019 per week. That's 46 work hours or 41 waking hours. Now, 46 work hours. So if you work a normal full-time job at 40 hours, that's more than you would normally earn. So think about that for a sec. The silver lining on this though is that at the end of 10 years, your return on investment will potentially be, if housing prices increase at 8.3% per year, about $1.8 million. What are the pros? Well, you get to have a home that you can call your own, and that's what we've all been brought up to want. You potentially also get lots and lots of space, and you get that reputation for being a homeowner. And very importantly, you get the stability of owning your own home. What are the cons? Well, plenty of bills. And ultimately, the bank owns your house, not you, until you pay it all off. It's expensive, you get into a long-term mortgage, and you'll have no time, or very little time, your 4 weeks of annual leave, for travel, adventure, family, friends, and relationships, and all those nice things. And also, you'll pretty much need full-time work for this. All right, so thank you for listening. I hope this has been useful. What I want to achieve out of this is just giving an idea of what the different options are in your life, and how you can choose from a position of knowing, how you can do your own research and find out what really suits you. So how do you really want to spend your life over the next 10 years? Do you value time, relationships, and experiences over possessions? And do you really need or want to live in Sydney, or could you consider less expensive places around the country? Ask me anything, like and subscribe. Thanks very much, guys.
That's no moon. It's a space station.